Hi, my name is Zach Martin. It's April 7th, 2018. This is my persuasive speech, and I am doing it on human trafficking. Most people, when they think of human trafficking, they think of it, across the ocean. But as you can see from this map, that it is prevalent in our country and it is growing. Statistics from the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign in 2018 states that human trafficking is a worldwide business that generates over $150 billion a year. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise, second to illegal drug trafficking. And it supports gangs, cartels, and even terrorism. And it's thriving in our country. There's no official estimate on how many victims exist in the U.S., but according to the 2017 Department of Health and Human Services, there's over 168,000 calls, texts, and emails to the national hotline, and hundreds of thousands of victims are affected each year. We see victims everywhere. We see them at a hospital, at your school, or even just walking around the street and you don't even know it. After today's presentation, I hope you can be able to recognize the prevalence and how it's growing in our country, identify the victims and the perpetrators, learn about the efforts and laws in South Carolina, and advocate for more resources to support victims. First, I'd just like to give some general information about human trafficking. Shared Hope International, a nonprofit group aimed at prevention, defines human trafficking as modern-day slavery, which involves the use of force, fraud, coercion, to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. According to Polaris, some common businesses that may use forced labor are farms, factories, hotels, and even massage parlors. Now that you understand the crime, let's talk about the victims. Trafficking victims include both sexes, all ages, nationality, gender doesn't matter, and immigrants with or without a legal status. Victims commonly enter human trafficking at the age of 14 to 16. Some of the risk factors are that some victims with prior history of sexual abuse have a cycle, and they can be in that cycle over and over again. Homeless or runaways are usually easy targets because they usually enter prostitution just to survive. Some of the warning signs provided by Shared Hope International is signs can be physical behavior, emotional behavior, and there's lists of some of those on the slide. Now that you have a better understanding of the victims, let's talk about the perpetrators, the traffickers, and the buyers. The traffickers work on the concept of supply and demand. They profit from the victims, and they can be strangers, family members, friends, or even a boyfriend. San Miguel explains that a trafficking ring needs the recruiter who identifies and gets the victim, the travel agent, the document thief or forger, the employer, which is the head man and the trafficker, or the enforcer, who just basically keeps the victims in line. As explained by Hilton, the human trafficking control cycle includes several phases to gain complete control over victims, that is, recruitment, initiation, and indoctrination. Data from the human trafficking facts shows that social media is the main way that recruiters get recruits, and they can do this by an intimate relationship such as marriage, a girlfriend, whatever, and this is the top recruitment tactic for sex traffickers. Dill relates how initiation involves isolation that can be through violence, branding, drugs, and even gang rape. Indoctrination leads victims usually to become traffickers themselves or enforcers. Research from the Demand Justice Project from Shared Hope International showed that the buyers are mainly men between the ages of 17 to 71. They purchase this labor or sex act. They're the ones that fuel the industry. And social media, like traffickers, is the main conduit for the buyers. In 2014, Shared Hope International reported on 4 major U.S. trafficking areas. 26 served no time. 69% got suspended sentences, with the average sentence between 1.5 years or so. Now let's review the status of human trafficking efforts in South Carolina. South Carolina is reported to have a grade low C, close to a D. Shared Hope keeps track of all state efforts towards human trafficking, and South Carolina's score is pretty low. Reasons for the C is law enforcement do not have mandatory training for human trafficking. They're not allowed wiretapping, which makes sting operations pretty difficult. Law enforcement officers not clearly authorized to investigate crimes or buying or selling sex with minors over the internet. Finally, let's talk about the individual, which is you guys. What can you do to help prevent trafficking and to support victims? First off, to be aware of some of the professionals who come in contact with victims would be medical professionals, educators, and the big one is social services and foster care. The National Center of Missing and Exploited Children in 2016, 1 out of 6 runaways were likely child sex trafficking victims. 86% were in the care of social service or foster care. Here are some of the public-private partnerships, and the biggest one is Truckers Against Trafficking, TAT. They train over 500,000 drivers in human trafficking. They reported 500 cases, and over 50 of them involved minors. Here are some of the victim support systems in South Carolina. Firstly is Jasmine Road, which is just a house for human trafficking victims. And next is called Switch, which provides just sources to support victims. Now let's review a little bit of what you've learned. You've learned that it's a thriving industry in the U.S. affecting any age, race, gender, and nationality. The vulnerable population are the ones that are most at risk. Social media is the prime conduit for the traffickers and buyers. And you learn about some of the common warning signs for victims. You learn about some of the likely perpetrators. You learn about professionals who have most contact with the victims, and local efforts and need for advocacy. Now that what you guys have learned, if you've seen anything suspicious, if you think somebody might be a victim, please, please, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at this number. You just might save a life. Thank you.
That's pretty good.
Tom,
How they doing?
it's still filming.
Was I supposed to stop?
No.